So good evening. My name is Raul Parangao, and so tonight I will provide a budget presentation as to how the district developed its budget and the processes that we go through in order for us to be able to finalize the budget and submit to the board for approval. And so we'll start with the structure of the budget. The general structure of the general fund budget includes the beginning fund balance. It's almost like our savings account at home. So we have a beginning fund balance, and then we evaluate our revenues and our expenditures. And the difference between the two could be a surplus or it could be a deficit, depending on how much revenue or how much expenditures we receive. And then we determine our ending fund balance by taking the beginning fund balance plus the deficit or surplus, and that's the ending fund balance. And then from the ending fund balance, we deduct all the designations, and that could be legally required designations or some contractual obligations or some decisions that are actually made by the board. And so therefore, from that determines what the reserve amount is. And so we're going to go into some details on each and every one of those categories. The general fund of the district are made up of several categories. For example, you see the unrestricted general fund, supplemental grant, parcel tax, special education, routine restricted maintenance, and categorical programs. And again, you're going to be able to see some of the details of that as we go through the slides. So let's start with revenues. So what is the makeup of revenues in the district's general fund? So you will see that there are quite a number of categories, revenue sources that we bring into the district. The first one is the local control funding formula. And the local control funding formula are made up of those four basic components, which is the enrollment and average daily attendance, the base funding, supplemental grant, unduplicated pupil counts, and the property tax. So those are the component of the local control funding formula. We also receive federal revenues, such as Title I, Title II, Title III, and we also receive special education grants from the federal government. And then the state revenue, we receive lottery. Believe it or not, yes, we get money from the lottery. When there are more winnings, we receive more money from the state. We also get one-time discretionary fund, and for the last 5 years, we got Proposition 39, which is a funding for us to be able to conserve energy in this Proposition 39. In local revenue, we get donations from our parent organizations, PTA, PTO, and we also get funding from Fremont Education Foundation, FUSD, partnership with the City of Fremont. We generate funding from leases of our facilities. So you probably noticed that at night and on weekends, some of our facilities are being used by citizens. We collect rent from that. We make money from interest income because the money that we deposit into the state to the county treasury, that makes interest. And we also, our community has approved a parcel tax, and so we gain about $4.3 million from the parcel tax. So in the last 2 years, the board approved to transfer some money from the adult education fund. And so it is a different fund in the district, but they have some extra funds available. And so in the last 2 years, the board approved to transfer $700,000 for each year. And so that's happening in 18-19. It happened also in 17-18. And then there are contributions to other programs. For example, special education program needed additional money because the federal and the state government do not provide sufficient funds, and so we need to contribute funds for those programs. And you're going to see that on the succeeding slides. So here is the representation of our revenue in the district in real dollar amount. And this is, by the way, the 2018-19 latest approved budget. And so those are the categories that I mentioned earlier. On the top, and here are the types of revenues that we receive. And so in the unrestricted general purpose fund, which is the main funding source that we get for the district, you will notice here that we bring in about $249.2 million. Then we have supplemental grant, parcel tax, special education, all the way to categorical programs. So here is the parcel tax that I mentioned, $4.3 million. And here is the special education program. I'd like to bring your attention to the special education. If you will notice that we are bringing in approximately $30 million in special education, but here we are contributing a significant amount from the unrestricted general fund, a total of $58.3 million that is transferred to the parcel tax, transferred to special ed, $46.3 million, a $10.8 million to routine restricted maintenance, and a $0.1 million to categorical programs. So let me explain some of those items. See here, the $1.1 million is a contribution to a parcel tax fund because the services that we provide using the parcel tax fund is not enough. The money that we receive is not enough to cover all the expenses, and therefore we have to contribute $1.1 million. Similarly, in the special education program, the federal government is funding $30 million, but the expenditure is over $70 million. It's about $75 million, and therefore we have to contribute $46.3 million so that we're able to balance the budget. And in the routine restricted maintenance, we contribute $10.8 million to it because it is required by law that in order for us to be able to maintain the buildings and the facilities of all 42 schools in the district, that we must contribute 3% from the general fund into routine restricted maintenance, and the value of that is $10.8 million. So all in all, the district general fund brings in a total of $384.9 million. And here on the categorical program, when you see the local revenue, $3.2 million, this amount here, those are primarily the donations from our PTA, PTO parent organizations. They do fundraising and they provide those fundings for our school sites. So in a chart, I actually put a pie chart in terms of what is the representation of what the LCFF, the federal, the state, and the local. And you will see right here that a big chunk of our revenue is made up of LCFF. Approximately about 80% of the district general fund is coming from local control funding formula, and about 12% or about 13% is from federal revenues, and about 14% from the state, and 3% from the local revenue. So in terms of expenditure, so how do we spend our money? So you'll see here, there are several categories on the expenditures. So we have the certificated salaries, classified salaries, books and supplies, employee benefits, services and operating expenses, capital outlay, other outgo, and so on. But here we just provided you with some information in terms of what falls into each one of those categories. And so, like for example, the teachers, the nurses, speech therapists, psychologists, they're actually part of the certificated ranks, and that's why they're part of this. The superintendent, assistant superintendent for instruction is uncertificated. On the classified, we have paraprofessionals, we have clerical, custodians, bus drivers, associate superintendent like myself. I'm actually on the classified salaries. And then the employee benefits are those that are statutory benefits. We have to contribute towards the IRS and the state, and including the pension contribution, is on the employee benefits. On the books and supplies, we have textbooks, reference books, instructional materials for the classroom, and then we have to pay our utilities, contracts, special ed contracts, insurance, and so on. We have furniture and equipment, and then the contribution to Mission Valley ROP, and also sometimes we have to make contribution to another fund, like the cafeteria fund, when they're actually having some financial trouble. Did you have any questions, sir?
I just, special education contracts, what does that mean? Does that entail?
So when we have some individualized education plan and the disability is quite severe, and we don't have the services in the district, we have to actually use a contractor to provide those services. And so those are very, very specialized service.
A specialized care person works with a particular person?
Yes, for that.
With transportation also?
Well, that includes transportation. We have a transportation department, but currently we don't have sufficient drivers, and so some of our transportation are being contracted also, which is a requirement of the IEP.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. So now that you see what the components of that, now let's take a look at the real numbers. So again, in the same category on the top, but here are the types of expenditures. And so you will see that in unrestricted general purpose fund, our expenditure is $249.9 million, supplemental grant is $16 million, parcel tax $5.4 million. And here's what I was talking about earlier, $77.9 million. We bring in a little over $30 million in special education funding from the federal and the state, yet the actual expenditures to provide services to our special needs student is approximately $78 million. And then the routine restricted maintenance to maintain the buildings and categorical programs. So every time a parent organization makes the donation to the district and a grant, generally they come up with some type of guidelines and a letter saying that this donation must be used for a specific purpose, and that's why we have to make sure that we abide by that. All in all, our total expenditures in the district is $396.8 million for 2018-19. So here is the, again, in the illustration of what the makeup of the expenditures. So if you look at the salaries, certificated salaries, classified salaries, and employee benefits, it's a little over, it's approximately about 85% of the general fund budget, and the rest of them are the books and supplies, services, and capital outlay. So now that we know what the revenues, we know what the expenditures, now let's take a look at the ending fund balance and reserve. This is a rather important slide. So I mentioned that it starts with the beginning fund balance, and then we have the surplus or deficit, because that's the difference between revenues and expenditure, and then we come up with the ending fund balance. Now, once we know what the ending fund balance, we determine what the designations are, and these are the type of designations that we have. A revolving cash is a legally required designation. A prepayment in stores are also legally required designations. The carryover of unspent funds like local donations and other state entitlements. An example of that would be if, let's say for example, a parent organization makes $10,000 donation. Generally, they provide the donation at about February timeframe because during the year they're doing the fundraising, and sometimes it's a little late for them to send us the check, and there's not enough time to be able to spend them within the fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends on June 30th, and so a lot of times what happens is the $10,000 donation remain unspent at the end of the year. And so because it's a restricted item, it has a dollar amount that has to be spent for a specific purpose, we have to put them into the ending fund balance. It becomes part of the ending fund balance, but you have to designate them for a specific purpose, and so it has to be spent for the next year. And so a lot of times you will see that the ending fund balance tends to be bigger, and then once you deduct all the designation, the reserve is actually much lesser. And so the question is ending fund balance the same as reserve? And obviously when you look at this chart right here, by the time you go into the reserve, it's actually lesser. Ending fund balance is not the same as reserve. And so while ending fund balance is a measure of liquidity in the district, the reserve is the true measure of how much money is available for the district to plan and to spend in the future. And so I'll provide you some illustration on that in real numbers. So here is the summary of the real fund balance and reserve in the district. So again, same category. Those are the beginning fund balances of the district. You could see that 18.6 in the unrestricted and so on until you go to the very end of this is 30.3 million total. But I'd like you to take close attention into the categorical programs are primarily state entitlement and local grant. There's $11.2 million in beginning fund balance. This is the representation of funds that remain unspent from the previous year. And I could tell you that the makeup of that $11.2 million, approximately 7 million of that was a state entitlement for Proposition 39. We have been planning to spend that money, but we still yet to implement the project. I cannot spend them for anything else other than to implement the energy conservation program. And approximately about 3 million of that is actually for local donations, parent organizations' donation to the district. And that's why you notice right here that we plan to spend them all in 2018-19, and that's why you see the deficit right here, because the beginning fund balance exists. We're projecting to receive 26.1 million and then spending 36.9 million, hoping that we're going to be able to spend them all this year. And our projection is we're going to have about $500,000 left remain unspent. And here we're designating that does actually bring us a zero balance at the end of the year. But what you'll notice right here is that once you remove all the designations, the reserve is actually on the unrestricted general purpose. What it means is that all the other categories here does not generate a reserve. The only area that generates reserve is the unrestricted general fund. All the other ones right here, if you have any funds that remain unspent, it has to be designated, because either there are some requirement from the state or requirements from the parent organization, or some legally required that you must designate them and spend them in the out years. So here, once we deduct all the designation, that leaves us with $9 million in reserve, which is equivalent to about 2.28%. Now, the district is required by law to maintain at least 2% reserve. The governing board of the district also mandated that we have to maintain an additional 1% to make it a total of 3%. Well, here you could see that we are falling below that 3%. And that is a pretty dangerous zone at this time. The credit rating company, when we look at our financial, want to make sure that we have enough reserve, and when our reserve goes down, we're not we're not highly regarded in terms of credit rating, and it ended up to be ended up paying a little bit more interest when we actually go for selling the bonds down the road. And so this is important for us to always maintain a 3% reserve. So, so those are revenue, expenditures, fund balance, and reserve. Now, I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the LCPF calculation. How do we generate the local control funding formula? Because that is approximately 80% of the district's revenue. So the LCPF calculation are made up of these 4 major categories: enrollment and average daily attendance. We have unduplicated pupil percent, which is the number of students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and those that are English language learners. And so the percentages for the district is 27.8, 27.66, and 27.13 for the current and 2 out years. We also use the per student funding from the state, and so you notice right here, the state provides some funding for base grant and also supplemental grant. And then the cost of living adjustment, which is 3.7%, and the two COLA numbers, 3.46, 2.86 on the 2 out years. So once we put that together and we put them in the mix, what you'll see here is a summary. This is how much we get once you put those formula in place. You will see that the district receives $289.5 million in base funding, 304 and 317 the 2 out years. Then you see here all the supplemental grants that we get. And in total, we get $305.4 million in the current year, and $321.2 million next year, $334.9 the year after. This is the total dollar amount that we get once you put all those numbers in a formula. The reason why we have to separate out the supplemental funding is because those amounts has to be used for those students that are eligible. I mentioned about unduplicated pupil counts, students who are eligible to receive free and reduced lunch and English language learners. So that amount has to be used for those students. And so that is the revenue. And so we also look at the class size reduction, class size and the ratio. This, by the way, are the components that we use in preparing the multi-year projection for the current and the 2 out years. The class sizes that we use for planning is 24:1 on TK to 2 and 30:1 on grades 4 to 6. These are class size goals. These are not cap. And the reason why I say that is because the collective bargaining agreement with our teachers organization is actually 30:1. And so the district is currently operating on a 24:1, even though the collective bargaining agreement shows that we could operate 30:1. So for the secondary, it's 27:1 ratio. Now, you're not going to see 27 students in a classroom. What you're going to see is about 32.4 students. And the reason why is because this is a ratio. The students attend about 6 periods a day, while the teacher teaches 5 periods, and that's why we use ratio rather than class size. And then we also have some students who attend Mission Valley ROP some periods, maybe at least sometimes 1 or 2 periods, and some students who attend Ohlone classes for some college credit. Now, another category that we use in calculating the multi-year budget is the pension, which is STRS and PERS. Those are the pension for certificated staff and classified staff. You'll see right here in the blue bars, those are the amount, the percent of contribution to STRS and PERS prior to the state making the increase or imposing the increase on the district. You'll notice starting in 2014-15, the pension contribution has been increasing rapidly up until the current year, which is 2018-19. And so in 2013-14, we were contributing 9.02%. Today, we're contributing 16.73%. Next year, we were going to contribute 18.8%. And because the governor made a proposal to put some money towards the STRS, I think about $3 billion, now the new rate is 18.03%. And as you see in the out years also, it's supposed to be 20.19. Now it would be 19.44%. Did you have a question, ma'am?
What's the STRS?
State Teachers Retirement System. Yes. It's Public Employee Retirement System.
Okay. So different, you can use different?
Yeah, so certificated employees uses STRS and classified employees of course, yes. Their contribution rates are different. And when we did the calculation, we used the weighted average between the two because we had to calculate them for the entire employee of the district.
But is the per year budget change that's really an important number? I mean, there's a lot of like side things. It's not like that's all happening. Like the increase from year to year would be the increase of that budget over the next year's budget, correct?
Correct. It's on top of each other every year.
Right.
Yes.
So just gotta take a single leg jump.
Right.
Why is it going down and the proposed at the end? Is that going to be a constant reduction?
That would be, the proposal is for 1920 and 2021, because the governor put $3 billion towards STRS, the weighted average actually will be going down if that gets approved to 18.03 and 19.44. But then part of that, part of that is to maintain that level to 19.44% for the next 25 years.
Well, that was proposed how many years ago?
Oh, it was just last January.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would be debated this May, and then hopefully it gets approved by June.
Okay.
Yeah. So the original plan was, you see, the 20.19%. The original plan was to keep them at that level for the next 25 years. Now the new proposal is to maintain them at 19.44 and keep them for the next 25 years. So you could imagine that there would be some savings for the next 25 years. However, we are still paying significantly more than the previous years from the original plan, which is 9.02%. in real dollar amount, it's the same slide except that I put the real dollar instead of percent. And so if you look at prior to the increase, we were paying 17.78 million per year in contribution to both pension, and then it keeps increasing every year. And today we are contributing 45.17 million in pension contribution, and then next year we were slated to contribute 51.2, but now it's going to be 49.1. So that provides some relief for us. And then in the out years, supposedly 56.23 million, now it's going to be 54.13 million. I think if you look at this number compared to how much we contributed before, it's significantly more, and it's definitely more than those, almost triple what we used to contribute. So, the other item that we use in preparing the multi-year projection is the salary increase offer to FUDTA in all our bargaining units. So at the preparation of this presentation, we made this offer to FUDTA, and more recently we made the same offer to CSEA, which is another bargaining unit, and also with SEIU. That's why it's not yet updated, but this should have been, say, salary increase offer to all employees. And so this is the same offer that we offered to FUDTA in all the bargaining units. It's a 2% for the current year, and a formula for the next 2 years. And the formula would be whatever cost of living adjustment we receive from the state minus the weighted average increase in pension contribution in the out years. If you would go back to this, the average increase in pension contribution for next year would be 1.3%, and the average contribution for the year after would be 1.41%. And that's why when you look at this formula, if the COLA would be 3.46% next year, minus the 1.3, our offer to our employees would be 2.16%. Similarly, in the out years, if you look at 2.86 COLA minus 1.41, the offer is 1.45%. Well, granted, these numbers might move because this is a proposal. The governor really has not approved this yet. And so, depending on what the final numbers will be, this number would be recalibrated. But what we know is what has been proposed in January. Generally, it doesn't change a whole lot by the time you get into the final approval of the budget. So here is the impact of those proposals. The cost of 1% salary increase to all employees is about $3.2 million. And I broke them down by the bargaining units. But if you look at the actual impact of the budget, it's $6.4 million for the current year, $6.9 million the year after, and $4.6 million in 2021. All in all, for 18-19, the impact to our budget would be $6.4 million, $13.3 million, and $17.9. You will notice that the offer for 18-19 is reflected on all the years. It's because, like you said, it's a stair step. Once you provided that, it rebased the salary schedule, and then you put the next increase on top of the other. And that's why it's actually calculated this way.
Compounding.
Compounding, yes. Thank you. So just to put some perspective, these are the salary increases that we provide to all our employees in the previous years. So in 12-13, we provided a 4% one time. It's not an ongoing salary increase. But in 13-14, it's actually 2% ongoing. And then yearly thereafter, we have been providing ongoing salary increases until we get to 17-18. The salary settlement for 17-18 was 1.05% ongoing and 1.05% one time. That's why you see those two numbers here. And then these numbers that you see in the three years, 18-19 all the way to 2021, are all offered to all our bargaining units. It hasn't been settled yet. We have not reached any agreement with well, we've actually just more recently reached an agreement with one of our bargaining units, which is the CSEA group. They represent clerical and paraprofessionals. We still yet to settle with FUDTA, which is the teachers organization, and also with SEIU, which are our maintenance and custodians. Now, special education, we talked earlier about special education. I'd like to put them in perspective. For the current year, our shortfall is 46.6 million. What this means is that the expenditure exceeds our revenue by 46.6 million. So the federal and the state government do not provide sufficient fund to be able to cover all the expenses. But that's not unique for this year. It's actually the same from the previous year. And when we look at the historical numbers, we see that the budget deficit, the average grows by about 3.7 million each year, again compounding on top of each other, which is approximately about 12% increase each year. And so guess what? What happened is when we have a shortfall, the unrestricted general fund has to cover for that shortfall. So all in all, once we have all those numbers calculated, we put them into a calculation, and this is the outcome. And so we calculate the revenues for the current and the out years, the expenditures for the current and the out years. We included the salary offer, which I explained earlier. And by that, we calculate how much is the estimated reserve. I mentioned in the 18-19, we have 2.28%. The year after, we have 2.99 and 3.26% reserve. However, in order for us to be able to reach this amount, we have to identify 14.2 million in budget reductions or revenue enhancement. As you could see right here, this is a deduction, and we won't be able to make these numbers without making that reductions in our budget.
So how are you gonna do that reduction?
That's actually the next slide. So, so on the next slide, we try to identify areas where we may be able to make the reduction and also enhance the revenues. And so in our review of the budget, almost every corner of the budget, this is what we were able to identify. And unfortunately, it's a reduction of staffing, about 104 full-time equivalent, amount to approximately $10.1 million. And those are the breakdown in terms of where those cuts might be coming from. But on this, on the enhancement of the revenue, a possibility could be a future parcel tax. It could be facilities rental. I mentioned that we're also gaining rents from renting our facilities, but we have new opportunities in renting our facilities. For example, next year in 1920, the elementary schools at the Kennedy attendance area are going to be moving, the sixth graders are going to be moving to Walters Middle School. Well, there may be some classrooms that are available for us to be able to rent out, and that would generate some revenue. The other part is energy conservation. I'm sure that there's always an opportunity for us to save energy and, you know, just changing mindset to make sure that lights are off and other, you know, unnecessary, appliances are not, you know, consuming energy. And so we could actually look at some of those areas. They may not be as big, but every dollar helps in order for us to be able to save money. So those are just items that we were able to identify at this time.
Is there a proposed parcel tax?
The board has discussed the possibility of future parcel tax. And at this point, the preliminary target would be March of 2020. That is not yet set in stone. We're still looking into the feasibility of that. And again, the amount is still yet to be determined because we're trying to figure out if it's going to work or not.
Well, the amount always seems to be conservative. You know, homeowner here in Kennedy area. And I know the part of those Measure K, part for K, seem to be, in all honesty, even as a homeowner, it's a minuscule amount compared to the homes that you're purchasing here. And I'm always wondering, well, we're always in this situation where we're scrambling. Although, I mean, there's a couple other questions I have. Why do we go so conservative?
So, good.
Well, when we passed the last parcel tax, I was a member of the community, I wasn't on the board. And I remember that effort. And the challenging thing, now that I'm learning about what happens on this end and looking at how other districts have handled parcel our community, how much less our community contributes in parcel tax than surrounding
Oh,
communities.
absolutely. I think when the tax the same time as Kate, we were at $73. And somebody just, I think it was a little more than 121.
Yes,
And what would that 121 do
right.
for us, right? I mean, it's just a floated idea of just saying, we always do it on conservative.
Yes.
And or a little bit of worry, but I think the Fremont community, I can't remember the last time it's voted down parcel tax as far as for the schools. Do you have any recollection?
No, so I'm hoping that we can be aggressive with that. I think the difficult thing right now is people spend so much right now for homes that asking for people to spend even any more is hard. It's not that we can't do it or shouldn't do it, we should. And that effort is going to have to be, well, everybody's going to have to be all in for it. Because I would like to see us ask for a lot. There's also,
I said a lot.
Enough is a lot more. The other thing that, Ann Crosby and I, one of the other trustees, we were in Sacramento this week, and right now there's a constitutional amendment being proposed that would lower that threshold for a parcel tax to 55%. And that may be on the same ballot as our parcel tax. And the legal question right now, and we don't have an answer to it yet, is if we have a parcel tax measure on the same ballot where the threshold lowers, would our parcel tax pass at 55% or not? And will that constitutional amendment be on the primary ballot in March or on the November ballot? So we're going to have to really look at how to structure this effort.
And that was my original question, was anything on the agenda, those parts. And the overall budget seems to be growing about, I mean, if my calculations are right, a little bit more than 6%. Is that, I mean, these are all projections, correct? I mean,
Yes.
you're a budgeting guru. So is that projection continuing, or do you project it's going to decrease, increase? What's your thoughts on that outward look, like if we're extrapolating away from the data here?
So the last recession that we had was in 2008, and it lasted all the way to 2010-11. And then right about 11-12 onwards up until now, it's been growing. As a matter of fact, I think it has grown quite a bit, that the state was able to save a big rainy day fund in the event that another recession would hit. The cycle goes right around 7 to 10 years. And so the prediction from UCLA and Legislative Analyst Office is that we're due for another recession. And so it's right around the corner. Now, if a recession would have to hit today, will the situation be the same as 2008? And the predictions is saying, no, it's not going to be the same because the state saved over $30 billion in rainy day funds to be able to weather the storm. And so to respond to your answer, the prediction is that there is a recession looming around and nobody could say when it's going to be. But when they hit, it won't be as hard as how it hit us in 2008. I think that...
Sacramento's at their max right now. They can't put anything else in the mattress right now.
Right.
It's mandated they hit their ceiling.
Correct.
But I just
Yes.
want to know, it's like, when we're building our budget, what is our projections?
Yeah. And the projections that we use right here are very calculated. The Department of Finance, UCLA, and LAO provide us some of those perspective to use those numbers. For the most part, I think they're coming to fruition year after year, and so they're very, very reliable source. But the warning that they gave us is there's one looming, so be careful and start saving money because it's right around the corner. Now, to the point about the local revenue, it is important to note that in Alameda County, we have 18 school districts in Alameda County, and Fremont by far is the lowest parcel tax or local revenue in the entire Alameda County. So we did the chart. I tested them in 2015, 2016, and 2017, and it never changed. Fremont is still the lowest locally funded on a per student funding, in Alameda County. So.
And we're the largest district next to Oakland, so it's definitely a contrast.
So, my question is, we live in the richest state in the union,
Yes.
and yet we have funding for our schools that's something like 47th or something. Why? What are we doing to get the governor an axe?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. The education budget in California is called Proposition 98, and when it was approved, I don't know how long ago it was, Prop 98, but the formula for that is approximately about 40% of the state general fund budget. But the question is the 40% the minimum or the maximum? And the Prop 98 says that the minimum guarantee is approximately 40%. Now, the state has always exercised the minimum, but they never actually goes beyond the minimum. And so it's a matter of priority for the state. And so more recently, we had a video that we published into our website in terms of full and fair funding. We need to advocate for full and fair funding from the state, and we're asking our citizens to go into our website, take a look at it, and then there are plenty of instructions how to be able to do this. It's very, very simple, and send a letter to our legislators and to our governor.
And
And if you look at the changes, when I was in California public schools as an elementary school student, that dates me probably, but we were near the top per pupil spending.
right, they still did a lousy job, but still.
Right, well, I walked into a classroom that was fully stocked, and it wasn't because the teacher had spent their own money to stock the school.
Right.
It wasn't because my parents had been given a list. It's because our state invested in education.
I agree.
And this is a very complicated topic, I know, but when you look at when we started to drop off, we really have to be honest with ourselves and look at Prop 13. And we need to start considering Prop 13 reform. And there's an initiative going forward right now, the Schools and Local Communities Funding Act, which would reform Prop 13 to eliminate a corporate loophole.
Right.
So that would be a good start that would allow us to reinvest that money back into our schools and local communities. But speaking to some of our legislators on Monday and Tuesday this week, there are some folks who are really looking to be more aggressive and reform Prop 13 in more fundamental ways. And I think we really need to think about that as
The
well.
thing is, Prop 13, the corporate deal is a big problem, that needs to be fixed. But for homeowners, if you buy a home today, you're paying big taxes. Prop 13 says basically that's what you're going to pay for the rest of your life if you live there. And I think that's a fair deal. But I don't think it's fair that the corporation gets that, because that's not what it's for. It was for people that buy a home when they're young, live in that home. When they get old, they're not taxed out of that property because in 30 years, theoretically, it's paid off. Okay? So if taxes keep going up, unless you put a lot of money away, you're not going to be able to afford just the taxes on your home, regardless of the size of your home. Okay? But the other thing that gets me is every school district in the state of California has the same basic problem we do. We don't get enough in the state. There's got to be an organization that puts all you people together somehow, I would think, and that you would work on this. It doesn't seem to me like anyone works on it.
Yeah, we are actually working on it at the county level, and then the county superintendents are all meeting together and working at the state level. And so we actually do have a rally that we're going to go up to Sacramento on April 3rd and meet with the legislators and talk to them about what the dilemma is and how.
And how come none of that stuff that gets on TV?
Sorry, say that?
How come none of this stuff gets on TV?
Well, that's what we need, it's just a fledgling effort right now, but now the groundswell is starting, and so, yes, we need to make sure that the communication is really widespread, and so that's part of why we're starting to just educate, because school finance is not that interesting to a lot of people, and so we're glad that all of you are here, because it is something that's really important, and it's pretty complex to understand, but we need to simplify it and send the right message, so we appreciate your feedback on that too.
So as you notice in this presentation, there are two major areas that if the state would focus and provide funding to the school, we could probably get out of this problem very quickly. You notice how much short we are on special education program. It's about $46.6 million. And you notice the amount of contribution, additional contribution we provide for our pension for our employees, which, you know, it was not long ago. It was 2013-14 when it was only 9%, and now it's all the way to 18%. If the state would focus on those two items, even if you just address half of the deficit of special education program, like 23 million, that could make a lot of difference for our district. And if they would just cover the increases in pension, and by the way, this increases in pension contribution really is not the fault of the school district. This is a problem in the way the STRS and PERS are doing their investment and using a very aggressive assumption that did not materialize, that led into unfunded liability, and now all of a sudden the responsibility is getting passed on into the school district. And so just addressing those two topics will bring us additional, significantly more funding that would address most of our problem here in the district. But I'd like to actually cover this very last slide because this is very important. So we talk about fund balance and reserve, right? And so we looked at how are we doing with the reserve over the last couple of years. And so if you look at 11-12, we had 10.14%. But because of those budget deficit, we have been using our reserve to be able to balance them. And so you could see here that it's been going down, and all the way to 16-17, we were down to 2%, which is the minimum level of reserve. And then we were able to recover back up in 2017-18 to 3% because it's the 2% from the state and 1% that is required by the board. And then today, we are trending at about 2.28%. And in the next 2 years, we could maintain a 3% reserve if we make those budget reductions of 14.2. So you could see right here that we have been using, I mean, I consider this like a savings account. If you try to look at it in terms of the home budget, this is like the savings account. We're actually drawing money from our savings account, and it's actually getting down to a very low level. And it's not enough if you have any emergency cases in the district. And so that concludes my presentation. You know, if you have any other questions, we'd be more than happy to have, you know, a little bit more discussions.
I do have a question. You kind of lost me on the state gives you 3% or 3.5% or whatever it was.
What does
On the COLA slide.
And you were, yeah, it was back 4 or 5 slides. And you give.
which one is it?
Pay raises.
Pay
Oh yeah, this one. Yes.
with the COLA minus pension.
Yeah,
It's
the
talking
COLA.
about-
This one here or
No, the COLA minus pension, the offer, that.
this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how does that work again?
So for the current year, the district's offer to our employees is 2% increase from where they're at right now. And then next year, we're making another offer for the out years, 2019-20, and it's the cost of living adjustment. So every year, the state tells the district, here is the cost of living adjustment. This is how much money you're going to get for next year. And that amount, as of today, based on the projection, is about 3.46%. So if our revenue, if we are getting 3.46% in revenue, how much of that could we provide as a salary increase to our employee? And so what we're saying is we would like to use some of that money to cover the increase in pension contribution, which is averaging about 1.3%, and then the remaining amount, we offer that as a salary increase to our employees. Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
If you do it that way, the teachers are losing money every year, right? The cost of the COLA goes up, the cost of living goes up 3%, and you're giving them 2%, even though 1% is going into the retirement fund. They're still losing money, right?
Well, that is true, because the increase in cost of living, the real cost of living in the Bay Area, probably is significantly more than 2%.
It probably is.
Yeah, and we could only offer 2% because that's about all that we're getting from the state. If we're getting 5% from the state minus the pension contribution, then yes, we could actually provide more. But at this point, the state is projecting that we're getting 3.46%. We just need to be able to cover the pension contribution. By the way, the pension contribution also provides benefit to our employees. You know, when they retire at 55-year-old, in some cases 62-year-old, the amount of lifetime pension is quite significant. And so while we are making that contribution, that provides benefit for our employees lifetime. And so in order for us to be able to have enough funds to be able to cover the salary increase, we first have to cover the pension contribution. Yes.
And I think this is really difficult, because I know as a person, when somebody's contributing to my retirement account, that doesn't help me pay my bills today, right? I have bills today that are going up, and it's great that my pension is being contributed to, but I need to pay my water bill and my rent today. And it is very frustrating to have what is called a COLA, cost of living adjustment, which when you hear that term, you want to have faith that that is tied to the actual cost of living in the area where you live. But the state is providing that COLA, the same exact COLA, to every district throughout California. So that amount is not tied to the actual cost of living increase in each individual area. It's the same here in Fremont as it is for, you know, folks in the valley or in far northern California, where the cost of living is not going up like it is here. It's a very difficult situation, and you know, I think I can only speak for myself, but I understand that what we're offering, what we feel we're able to offer, is not tied to what folks in our community are actually seeing as their increases in cost of living.
When they say COLA, is that a percentage to our budget?
Yeah, it's on the LCPF. Remember the 80% of our budget?
Well, the total budget went up much higher than that.
No, so they only applied that to the revenue, not the actual expenditure. So
I saw the revenues go up more than 6%. So isn't that an increase to the budget? Straight dollar amounts.
There are other increases in the budget that we identify, not just COLA. For example, if you look at the total revenue.
That's what I asked. I said, is COLA the only thing? It didn't seem, because that's not 3%.
Well, one of the other things is that we're increasing enrollment, so every time we add one more student, we get a certain extra dollar amount.
Where is that? Right here.
We are still a growing district. We actually are seeing some of our additional revenues from more students in the district.
So if the number of students remain flat, you will see the 3.46% on it. But I think next year we're slated to grow our student population by about 700 students. So you get extra funding for those additional students. But at the same time, we have to hire additional teachers and additional staff to be able to serve the increased number of students. Yes, ma'am.
I guess my brain is scattered, but so I know now we have the same COLA for all the districts in the entire state, but how do other distribute that percentage to their employees? Are each district deciding how to distribute the raises versus the?
It's all done through bargaining. So each district, the bargaining team of the teachers and the other employee groups meet with the district's bargaining team and they work it out together. So every district has a different deal depending on what they bargain.
So I think the other consideration is how much reserve do they have from the onset. And so, for example, I showed you that last year our reserve was 3%. So we're starting with 3%, and we get this cost of living adjustment from the state, but then we have increases in cost also. Some other districts, and there I could name a few, for example, our neighboring district here has about 21% reserve. The other one has 11% reserve today. So that's one data point that we need to remember. The other part is there are 18 school districts in Alameda, up and down 880. How does our employees or our teachers, where are they at in the ranks in terms of the pay? And you will find that our teachers are either on number 2 or number 3 from the top in terms of the highest paid employees in Alameda.
Paid or compensation?
Excuse me?
Paid or compensation?
Total compensation. Total compensation, including if you add up the salary plus the health benefits, all in all, we are number 2 or number 3 in Alameda. And so while you may be seeing some salary increases in another district at a higher number, let's say 3%, 4%, it is because, number one, they maybe have higher reserve, and second is they're trying to catch up with Fremont Unified, or number one is New Haven, which is Union City, has the highest teachers pay.
So,
Yes.
then our own districts receive funding differently too. So we get ADA, but then like Santa Clara, I know they get basic aid. So why do districts get paid differently, and how does that work?
So you're bringing up a good point about the basic aid district. So let me explain the difference. So Fremont Unified is, we call them local control funding formula district. We calculate our revenue using our average daily attendance. And let's say, for example, that amount is $200 million, right? By the time you multiply your ADA times the funding that you get from the state. So imagine the $200 million as the total funding for the district. Next thing is, where is that money coming from? Is that really coming from the state? And the answer is no. The $200 million, the first portion of the $200 million comes from the property taxes that you and I pay. And so, for example, in this case, let's say the property tax that we receive from the Alameda County Treasurer's Office, let's say, is $120 million. So you use that $120 million first, and the remaining $80 million, that's the amount that the state provides us, called state aid. Now, the number is still 200, right? And so to compare that with a basic aid district, use the same example, $200 million, but their tax collection is $250 million because they have higher home prices, their assessed valuation are high. In that case, if your property taxes exceeds your calculation, you got to keep them all. And so, same district, same number of population, we got 200, they got 250. It's because their assessed valuation of their homes are higher and they pay higher property taxes. Well, they got to keep them all. And so if you calculate that on a per student basis, they definitely have significantly more money than us. There's approximately about 10% of the school districts in California that is in that category. There are about 1,000 school districts, so approximately about 100 school districts in California are in that category. Many of them are in San Mateo County area. I mean, at least more than half of the districts in San Mateo are a basic aid district. So imagine a school district that has $16,000 per student funding, whereas your neighboring district has about to $9,000 per student. Over your life in education, about 13 years, the one in basic aid definitely is funded more than those that are non-basic aid district. And so that is another situation in the education funding that I think needed to be solved because of the inequity in funding.
And then just one other piece on the other side is that districts like Oakland and Hayward who have students in high poverty and a lot of English learners and foster and homeless youth, they get a whole extra set of funding that we don't get. And so we're kind of stuck in the middle. We're not in the very wealthy, but we're also not in lower socioeconomic. So we're kind of, that middle child. And so we don't get a whole lot of money on either end, which puts us at the bottom of the Alameda County barrel.
And so that is, I think, what Dr. Wallace is referring to is the supplemental funding. So this amount right here, we get this amount. So we're about the size of Oakland. We got about $16 million in supplemental grant. And because they have high poverty rate in Oakland and high EL population, their numbers are probably more than double than this. They probably have the same amount of base funding, but the supplemental funding, they get more than what we have. So.